Hey Buckaroos, welcome back to Musicom Academy, learning to be a radio program director. Today the lesson is all about AC, Adult Contemporary Radio. And we have with us Gary Berkowitz. I'm going to be talking with Gary. Gary's an AC consultant. He specializes in AC and getting 25 to 54-year-old listeners, although he also does classic hits and a few other formats too. But mainly his specialty is AC, which is a perfect person to talk to about an AC lesson, obviously. And Gary's had a lot of success doing it. He's also had a lot of success being a PD himself in CHR, in hot AC, in AC, obviously, and even news talk, which is, that's a formidable thing to go into because it's a totally different way of thinking. And, when you have success across a lot of different territories, you know what you're doing when it comes to a radio station and how to program it. We originally did about an hour and a half, and I cut out what I could, and then I looked down and I'm going like, wow, I'm still over an hour, and I was just nothing more that I wanted to cut out because it was all so important for you to hear and for you to listen to and pull into your mind if you want to do AC radio. So I did the next thing, which was cut it in half. So this is part one. Next week will be part two, and both are amazing. Number two is incredible. Part two, even better than part one. And man, that's saying something. So I caught up with Gary in Boca Raton, Florida. He's down there for the winter. He's down enjoying the sunshine with the family and all that other good stuff. So let's get this show on the road. All right, in the house, Gary Berkowitz. Good to see you, Gary. Thanks for doing this lesson. It's fantastic if you take your time out to do this.
Well, Pat, it's absolutely my pleasure because I love nothing more than talking about radio, of course. And being here with you is for me is very, very special because you and I go back so far.
Yeah.
Certainly to your Big 8 days when I used to listen to you, and when I used to listen to you on 99X.
Yeah.
As China Blue, I remember that. And then, of course, we got to work together, which to this day I go, oh, my God, Pat Holliday was on WHYT. How awesome is that? So it is great to be with you today, really.
Yeah, that's a long time. That's like 35, 36 years ago. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun working with you. For everybody watching right now, for Gary, I have worked for Gary. As a consultant, I have hired Gary, for a station in Toronto, and obviously worked with Gary. Obviously, that should speak volumes about how well I think he knows radio and all that sort of stuff. If you're looking for a consultant, and I'm going to put links to Gary's website, and also he has a channel too where he does what would you say? Certainly more current stuff than I do because I'm trying to teach somebody how to be a PD. Where you got stuff on there that's going like right to the moment and talking about things that are going on from a consultant's point of view. Would you say that's a fair assessment of?
Yes, very much so. And every now and then I'll jump back a little bit into the nostalgia pool a little bit. I try to keep it current and keep it positive because I'm probably I am the ultimate optimist for radio. So I just want to encourage people and try to share some of the knowledge that I've learned, over these many, many, many years of programming radio because it's been a long time.
Let's start racking through that because I got a ton of questions for you. This all started for me. There was a guy, Alejandro, and he's a programmer of Spanish radio stations in Mexico, and he wrote me. And he was really interested in AC. I think he was kind of maybe thinking like, whoa, I wonder what they're like to actually make a transition into programming AC. But my guess is I think he thinks maybe it's harder than it is, but as you know, there's some specifics for every single format that you have to know. So let's start there. So when you're going to be programming an AC radio station versus some other format, like what comes to mind that you're shooting for, like kind of, in an overall?
There's so many parts, as you know. There's the air talent, the music. AC, like every format, has certain nuances to it. You have some ACs that are a little more current based. You have some ACs that are more gold based, and then you certainly have those that are kind of right down the middle. Typically though, I typically work for mainstream ACs, and of course, that format is just when you think it's been the same for 2 or 3 decades, you realize, no, it hasn't. It's really evolved on a daily basis. But, the one thing, AC listeners, like maybe all listeners for that matter, they like what they know and they know what they like.
Yes.
So, and I've always kind of joked that, people say to me a lot, well, why did you choose to specialize in AC? And I said, because it was easy. It wasn't all that hard. That's not the truth. That's not really the reason.
Yeah.
The real reason was because I felt that it was a format that was going to be around for, forever. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't a come and go. It wasn't like Jam and Oldies or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That was here and gone. But what I typically look for on any radio station, Pat, when I think about my early programming days as a CHR, or as I still like to call a top 40 programmer.
Yeah.
I don't think that my mindset has changed all that much. Look, I'm in radio because of disc jockeys. I'll never forget, the first disc jockey that I saw broadcasting in New York City from Times Square. They were doing a radiothon for something back then. Maybe it was the March of Dimes or whatever it was. And getting back to your question, so it's that fine combination of the right music and the right talent and the right, I don't know exactly what the word is, but it's the right everything else. It's your imaging, it's your jingles, it's the way you present yourself to your community. Those are all important things to me when I'm putting these radio stations together. And of course, every radio station, this is a trite statement, but it's true. Every radio station, every market is somewhat unique. There's a lot of things that go into these radio stations. I might have been the guy who coined this phrase. It's the content or companionship part of the whole thing. And, we can maybe talk about that a little bit later on. But to me, the most important thing about radio, it's more important than anything, is the companionship part, because I think that's why people listen to the radio. Just like when I was a kid, the radio was my best friend. It was a companion, and the disc jockey, I truly felt was my friend. So that's probably the one thing that I look for. The companionship component of that is really, really important.
And that's really, I would assume, really incredibly hard to maintain when you're doing voice tracking and stuff, because it tends to, to me, voice tracking, at least the brunt of what I hear. I'm sure there's ones who do it really good, but it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like a real person speaking, as opposed to, somebody who's live and is, in the moment and all that sort of stuff, which would, to me, seem closer to being a companion than just a voice on the radio.
I'm going to throw this out there, and this might be the most controversial thing I'll say. I understand voice tracking. I understand why we have it. I get that in a lot of cases, you could argue it's a necessity, but I think it's very responsible for hurting radio, because that's not what radio is all about. No. Radio is all about being in the moment. Radio is about live. You know how things are now with social media, Gary Berkowitz, this and that about it. I get it. I understand it. And I work diligently with my stations to make it as good as we possibly can. But you want to know it's in this heart right here. I hate it. And I don't think it's a good thing for radio. In today's world, we can always figure out how to make things happen. No matter what industry you're in. If you're in the radio industry, in the medical field, look at pharmaceutical. They figured out a vaccine. There's got to be a way that we can figure out how to keep our radio stations live.
I agree. I assume that an average person can also tell. I mean, if you've been in radio for any amount of time, you can go voice track. A lot of times it's the levels are off. It's something really simple to pick it out. But that's a voice track. That's live. You can just tell, and that's that intangible that this station sounds better than this one. And I understand it too from a financial point of view, because if you have to close the doors, everything's gone. So you gotta
right.
You gotta make the nut. But it seems like other things. Try something.
Not being live is like driving a car without tires. And look, I'm not one of these radio used to be great, now it sucks guys. That's not me.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, no, me
I
either.
love after decades and decades and decades of doing it, I still get up as energized every single day, ready to go in and make radio great and help my stations that I work for get higher ratings and get higher revenues. That is my attitude. But, and there's a big but here, we have so many smart people in this industry. I would love to just have a seminar and just say, okay, guys, for 1 minute here, voice tracking is no longer an option. How are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
and again, I'm not trying to sound like the old guy complaining about the way radio is. I'm just the guy who's saying, talking to owners and to managers and to everybody, and just saying, guys, there's like this little part of this deal that we're forgetting about. That's
Yeah.
so important. It's so
Yeah.
important.
I always, and then we'll get off of this. I always just wonder, like, if you're a big chain and you have a lot of radio stations, why would you not take one and just say, I am purely just going to experiment with this thing for the rest of the chain? That's what other companies do. They do R&D. Take one that's in a comparable market and go, it might cost us $2 million to do this experiment. Take the shot, because there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, or as an industry, particularly if you're a big company like, I don't know, iHeart or one of the other ones. Like, and maybe they do it, and I just don't know that. But it seems like nobody wants to gamble with at least just one station just to
Yeah.
see. Let me get off of this. You're right. We could be here forever on this one.
Yeah.
You have a CHR radio station. There's a particular listener that you're thinking about. You have a rock radio station. There's a particular listener that you're thinking about. And there's an AC station. And there's another different type of listener that you're thinking about. I can't fathom that they'd all be the same person. You know what I mean? Possibly at times. But so that AC person, let's center in on that person. This is my target. Here's who I'm going for. AC station, mainstream.
It's typically a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Women make up the majority of an AC radio station's audience. I always say that when the ratings come out, you've really got to overachieve on the female side, because
Yep.
you can't depend on the male side. If you have great female listening and you get a little bit better male listening, you're going to be shooting through the top. You're going to be right up there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically a woman, and and maybe the answer to this question is a little bit different, with the pandemic where it's at versus pre-pandemic. But pre-pandemic, the station had huge appeal in that 2554 demo,
Mm-hmm.
because you were getting your younger end, not necessarily because they loved your radio station, but you were so good for them while they were working. The typical younger female response to an AC station, it's not my favorite radio station, but it's really good at work.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not my favorite radio station, but they play it at work because the customers like that station. So that's where a lot of that younger listenership came in, and it's always been a very, very solid station for working women, for moms, for all kinds of women, because it had a comfortable companionship element to it.
Mm-hmm.
The music was all songs they know, songs they like, songs they can sing along with, and it was always a good variety of older songs and just enough new to kind of keep them, within the mainstream.
Right. They're not, they're not out of it. They're still sort of in the social game to a degree. They don't have to
Right.
feel old. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So they could at least, gee, I heard this new song today, and they can discuss that with their daughters. And it's a format that's really made up of women, and it's about familiarity, and it's about companionship in a big way.
Mm-hmm. Would you say it's about? I always thought it. I could be wrong. I mean, you've done this way more than me. I mean, I've done a few AC stations, but I always thought one of the components of the music itself was, generally speaking, you had better be picking sort of pretty music. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's more melodic maybe than other formats, and maybe just to me, that's maybe how my mind works. It just goes along with, if you heard a song and it's relatively new to you, your mind is already out ahead of the song. Its song is going where your mind wants it to go. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I mean by pretty, as opposed to, I've seen stations where they'll take maybe not so much now though, but they'll take like a song that's maybe a slow song or a medium tempo song that's on, say, rock radio, but the singer just, it's got a gritty voice, or doesn't, it's that it just doesn't quite fit AC, at least to my ear, but everything else about the song should fit it, but it doesn't. It's just not, I don't know, pretty enough or sweet enough or what, I don't know. I don't mean wimpy.
Yeah.
I don't mean wimpy. Does that make any sense to you? Or is that what my out to lunch? Maybe it's just
no. As a matter of fact, I had a manager in a major market, and when I first met him, and they were interviewing me to be their consultant, that's how he described how he felt his station should be.
Oh,
he said,
wow.
I think that our station should be pretty. It should have a pretty sound to it, and I don't feel we do right now. I had never heard that before, and I said, Mark, I said, wow, I like that. I really do. And it's true, because when I get a music test back, I look at the ranker, I'll see certain songs there that I just go, wow, I know it tests great, but the essence of that song to me just doesn't fit.
Right. That's exactly what I'm, yeah.
And in AC, where I think you have to be careful, where I have to be careful, of course, is that, women's tastes are always changing. What might be pretty to me, or what might be melodic to me, a song that I don't think is like that might be to a woman who's 40 years old.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I joke a lot. I say that Bon Jovi has become the Frank Sinatra of today.
Yes.
I mean, he is, John Bon Jovi is to women what Frank Sinatra was to him, back in the 50s and the 60s, in the 60s. So how can I not play You Give Love a Bad Name? I'm saying, well, it kind of rocks and it kind of gets a little bit loud, and or Def Leppard, the same thing. There, some of the Def Leppard tracks like test like crazy, and you go, how is that going to fit into the whole scheme of things? But then I think back, like my top 40 days, we would go from You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone, into
You Shook Me.
Into You Shook Me All Night Long.
Yeah.
And we didn't think anything of it, So I really try to keep a very, very open mind, with music. I agree with you. I like the idea of keeping these stations pretty. If you follow your music testing, and if you kind of follow what the big rated stations are doing all over the country, you're going to be there most of the time, but every now and then there's going to kind of like be that outlier. And that's where the decision comes in. If we don't play, will this song help us or hurt us if we play it? And I've always been of the opinion, you want to get hurt by what you play, not by what you don't play. I talk about that a lot with my PDs, constantly. And I've kind of taken the position now that, especially with my program directors, because I respect them, and they're boots on the ground in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And they'll say to me, the sort's been on the air now for a week, and I've really got a problem with like 3 titles. And I say, before you even tell me what they are, just take them off. It could break us, but it's not going to make us. It won't matter.
Yeah. Would you agree with this? Because I certainly used to do this, and I would tell people that it's totally fine to do this. So if you're watching right now and you're you're a relatively newer PD, and something like that just happened, like Gary described, there's 3 songs, or one, let's just say it's one song. There's one song that comes in, and you put it on the air, and you kind of, maybe it's coming pretty good. You look at the charts and it's moving pretty good. You put it on, but then it's like, you know what? I just don't feel it. And you want to take it off, where maybe you won't, but Gary's saying, go ahead. And I would agree with that. But you could certainly take it off, and then 3 weeks later, you may feel different because you hear it on other radio stations, and you go like, hey, you know what? Now that I've heard it 10 times or 12 times, it's actually not as, my initial reaction wasn't exactly right. I'll just put it back on again, and ride it out. I mean, or just, or leave it off completely. But I mean, you can on, off, you can do that. It's not a big deal. I mean, would you agree?
Oh yeah. And I also do a fair amount of day parting. With certain songs. I have a day part on most of my stations. It's called Later Day, and Later Day means it doesn't start playing till 1 o'clock. And the thought process behind that, it's not terribly deep. Is when people first come in the morning and they're having their coffee and they're doing all their setup for the workday and whatever, I'll keep it a little prettier.
Yeah.
On the morning show, certainly. And then, in that 9, 10, 11, 12. And I'm thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm thinking by 1 o'clock, people have kind of like segued, into the second part of their day. And, they're
Maybe tired, actually. They would need a little more pick-me-up or something.
yeah, they're just in a different mental space.
Yep.
And they're also, I think, starting to think, okay, what am I going to do after work tonight? When I go home, do I have plans for dinner? Am I just going to go home and play with my kids or whatever? So I think, people are at 8 o'clock in the morning, take on the day. It's like, what do I have planned today? What meetings do I have? What do I have to get done today? Etc. By 1, 2 o'clock, I think people are just saying now, okay, that's when they're getting text, honey, do me a favor, pick up some eggs and milk on your way home, or pick up dinner at some place, whatever. So I've kind of opened up a lot of songs that have, if the criteria is met, if they have killer tests,
Sure.
if they're green right across, I mean, just every demo in 18, 24, 25, 34, 30, if it's just green and go everywhere, but I'm still a little bit uneasy, I'll usually advise, put later day on that song. And this way, and we'll play it on the weekend, and we'll play it starting at 1 o'clock. So I don't know. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's wrong. I don't know.
I think that's a totally logical and smart thing to do, because different songs just sound better at different times. You just throw one on and let it run for 24 hours. A lot of songs, most songs can do that, but a lot of songs they can't. They just just doesn't fit here. But 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 1 o'clock, 2, whatever, totally good. They actually sort of fit the visual soundtrack. If it was a movie, certainly better. Here's a question go along with that 1 o'clock thing. Prior to 1 o'clock, are you leaning into gold more?
I tend to have the same gold current balance 24/7, because I want the radio station to be very, very consistent. Just like I think it's very important for a restaurant to be very, very consistent. Whether you're going into that restaurant for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the food has to be good. The service has to be good. Successful restaurants have mastered the art of getting that all right. And I look at the radio station the same way. I want it to be consistent. It's like I always joke. My wife will say to me, "Hey, what do you want to do on Valentine's Day?" And I say, "I do not want to go out on Valentine's Day, because I hate all the restaurants have these Valentine's Day special menus." When I go to my restaurant, when you tell me we're going to go to the Greek place up the street, I want to know I'm going to be getting that chicken kebab. And if I walk in and it's not there, I am not a happy camper about it. So with the music, my stations all tend to be pretty standard, day part to day part to day part.
Let's go into some specifics of that type of stuff, because I know that if you're a newer PD, because I try to in this course put myself back into when I first started and knew a decent amount, because you're a jock and you're working for smart people. But ultimately, now all of a sudden, the ball's in your court, and you're like, what exactly did they do? So let's go through some stuff like that, just to give everybody, if you don't mind, and you don't have to give away any trade secrets, but just to give everybody a floor, so to speak.
Sure.
Here's what gets you into the game, and you're going to be sort of okay. Overall music universe, like all the songs in the library, don't count the Christmas songs, roughly for an AC station. How big would the universe of songs be? Currents and gold, roughly.
300.
Wow, okay. That's a smaller number than I would have thought you would have said. Okay, so 300. And how many songs are rotating, would you say, of that 300 as currents? In some form, the A's, B's, C's, whatever, that kind of stuff.
5.
5 currents? Okay. Wow.
Pat, you have this look of like, he's spitting this number out like boom.
No, no, it's not how fast you're doing it. It's the number itself. It's like, well, okay, 5. I mean, as you're saying it, it's like half of me like, okay, I can sort of get that, but at the same time, it's like pretty huge surprise. I would have thought you would have said at least 9 or 10 or 11. You know what I mean? But
You know,
not that 5 is wrong, not at all. It's just that, you know, everything is faster now.
the answer to this question, that is, you know, really changes because it really depends on what's out there. You know,
Yeah.
right now, I think we're in a very weird. Look, the world is in a weird place for so many reasons right now. But I think
Yeah.
with music, we're in a funny place right now because, you know, CHR has always been the supplier of AC's music.
And they're in
You know,
trouble. Yeah.
yeah, AC has never been successful in establishing its own artists. You know, or as I call them, the AC only artists.
Hmm.
And I don't want to mention any names. But
Yeah.
you know, there have been many of them over the years, and they can never get off the ground
Yeah.
because, you know, CHR needs to be the supplier of AC's music, and it's been not good for a long time now coming out of CHR. So we have to kind of like cherry pick the songs that we're going to be playing in AC. And
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of them out there right now. And, you know, the subject of currents, I mean, this has been I don't want to say an issue, but it's been
I would let me chime in and say this to my ear, and even from talking to some other people. And again, I'm not in the business like you are every single day, but just as a listener, I would say I almost go back at least 5 years, maybe 4 for sure, where current music is kind of lousy. You know, I mean, you know, and there's definitely some good songs for sure. There's good songs, but you know, as a brunt of, you know, if normal universe of current songs would be, I don't know, 60 on a typical basis that are coming out, probably in the past 40 of them would be good, 35. Now it seems like it's like 8 or
Well, yeah,
9.
and you know, the other thing, at least
Whew.
in the AC world, here's the real secret sauce. Okay, is that to our listeners in AC, the recurrents are the currents.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, they are,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and look, if we had 10 program directors on this call right now, everybody would be flipping out, you know, with, what do you mean only 5 currents? You know, it's always been, because for some reason, and you know, maybe I was there when I was a CHRPD. These are very, very current driven radio stations, but you know, today program directors inherently want to play currents, whether their station should or shouldn't. And many program directors are still, they really are secretly, they want to be A&R guys. Okay?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I've probably conducted since Thanksgiving 10 music tests in 10 different markets all over the country. And I
Hmm.
will tell you, the one thing that they all had in common, they had a lot in common, really. But the one thing they all had in common was we would be sorting through them and we'd be like, oh my God, you know, we can barely get enough currents and we can barely get 20
Yeah.
songs
Yeah.
that have really, really good, you know, scores on them.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, a typical 5 NFTs, I mean, this, I can remember, you know, this going back almost 15, 20 years ago. I mean, you're probably saying it's worse now, but you test 500 songs and you're lucky if you can find 250 that test decently, you know, which is, so
Totally.
half of them are totally gone, which is closer to your 300. Let me delve into that. You know, it's funny, it's not part of my regular questions that I was going to ask you, but
Sure.
you know, let's wing here. So you're playing 5 currents, and I would assume it's 1 per hour. So you're on a 5-hour rotation. Would that be, or it's two per hour, or it's bouncing? But what would that be? And that, here, let me keep going with the question. You can
Sure.
cover it all at once.
Sure.
So I'm assuming there's 5 of them. You're doing it 1 per hour. That's what I'm assuming. And so there's 1 in an hour. So there's a current song. How many recurrents are in the hour? Also, so as an example, if there was another 2 recurrents, and they're from probably, I don't know, even the last 4 years back, to most
Mm-hmm.
AC audiences, you just played 3 current songs,
Yes.
because most people would go, hey, what's that new song? And you go like, what? It's a 3-year-old song. You're thinking, let's think about 3 years ago. You're saying I just heard it? You know, I mean, that's my remembering of an AC audience. That
You're
they're
right. You're correct.
at least 3 years behind, 3 years behind the
Yeah.
time. So how many? So what would that configuration be? 1 an hour, a couple recurrents, 3 recurrents rather.
I would
One.
say, they're all a little bit different, but
Sure.
typically 1 current, 2 recurrents. So this way you're kind of covering your hour evenly, and
Yep.
you're always, you're always playing a song that, is from the last, couple of years. And
Yeah.
again, to these listeners, I still have to go back to 19 to get enough recurrence usually on most music tests.
Sure. Yeah. I could see where there's probably some songs that you could both go back to. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you could have to go back to 2017, 18, because for some reason or other, that maybe that a song from 2018 may hold up and seem just way more current than something now, as opposed to something from 2021 that clearly is not going to age well. It's still there, but it already feels older than it actually is, and it skew the feel of the station.
Currents are not a big part of an AC radio station. I mean, if you're playing 3 an hour and you're playing 12 songs an hour, it's not the majority of that hour.
So let's go to the gold now. You power golds, 1 an hour, 2 an hour.
Yeah, it depends on the clock. Probably about 4 power gold an hour. And
okay.
Look, on my stations, I have been and continue. I use a lot of 80s product, a lot.
Okay, that's another question. Great. Okay.
Because the 80s, right now are hot. I was just reading an article this morning. One of my stations sent me an article about how older music is clearly dwarfing newer music all over the world. This one came out this morning, and I read it really quick just prior to jumping on with you. And what it's really saying, I want to say, I don't think it was Rolling Stone, but it was in one of the trades that worldwide consumption of music, older music is clearly winning right now, way ahead of newer music.
The lesson that I put up for this week, I don't remember the number, 55, I guess it is. I kind of went through the Edison research thing and went point by point of and a lot of it is what we're talking about. Like, I don't think current music is any good. I'll just touch on it here for just a second in case somebody hasn't watched that. There's a University of Michigan study every year. I don't know if you're familiar with it, where they go into the happiness of people. They do it year after year. They've been doing it forever. And when people are not happy and they feel apprehensive about the future, they immediately turn to the past and everything in the past. Oh, I want to go back to the good old days. So going back to the 80s and 90s, 70s, 60s, whatever, depending on your age, that makes total sense. It's a trend. That's, so more turmoil in the world, the more they're going to look to the past. That's the U of M study year after year. That's pretty much their explanation of what they see in there. What's a number turnaround for your power gold that would make you nervous? In your mind, what's kind of, I don't think I'd want to go any faster than this.
Pat, the old answer to this question is a day and a day part on your powers, 2 days and a day part on your secondaries. But that was great, in 1991. When that was out there. I have some of my stations now, I have it even tighter than that because of the way people are consuming radio and the way people are listening. People aren't listening to the radio the way they used to. This is a debatable thing, but in the 70s, back in the 80s, it was a different world. And I really believe people used to actually listen to the radio. I think today, the way the radio is being used, they hear the radio more than they necessarily listen to the radio.
And that is part 1 of the AC format, Adult Contemporary with Gary Berkowitz. We'll come back next week with part 2. And I got to tell you, because we've recorded this whole thing already, the price of admission for part 2 is amazing. Gary goes through exactly how you would pick apart a music test and start going through the numbers and the songs and allocating the songs to specific categories. Seriously priceless. And that'll be on part 2 of the AC format. Until the next time, see ya.